Hello, everybody. My name is Nick Phan, unlike what my little label says here on Zoom. I am the artistic director of Collaborative Arts Institute of Chicago, and we are here for our sixth installment of Heard Over the Piano with our very special guests who will be featured on this weekend's concerts, which is part of the last concerts of the Collaborative Works Festival. This concert's called Modern Women, and it features two of our guests today, composer Stacy Garrop and mezzo-soprano Lynn Bottoms. If you could both join me, that would be fantastic. Hi.
Hello.
How are you both?
Good, doing great.
I love your beautiful backgrounds. As I said when we were logging on earlier, I'm loving the purple wall and I'm loving that orchid. It's gorgeous. Just before we begin this conversation, in case we have any sound issues to the peanut gallery who's listening, please type them in the comments. That's probably the most efficient way to let us know if there's any issues. And if you have any questions for us as we go along, please type those into the comments as well. I'll be doing my best to keep track of those and pass those along to our guests. So this concert, I'm actually very excited about because, we've been exploring nearly 5 centuries of women's music and our music composed by women. And here we are, finally at today, and we get to talk to a living composer. So Stacy, could you tell us a little, I know that our audiences are familiar with you already because we featured you last year as well, and Chicago knows you very well already, but please tell us a bit about yourself. Would you mind sharing your little brief bio?
Sure. Hello, everybody. It's nice to be here. I'm originally from California, but I got all my training in the Midwest, and so it wasn't very surprising that I ended up getting my first and only academic job in the Midwest. It was at Roosevelt University, and that was the first job I got right as I left college. And I was there for 16 years, and I finally had to admit to myself that if I really wanted to be an opera composer and symphony composer and everything else, I needed to leave. So I went freelance 4 years ago, and I have been living in Chicago writing music ever since. And my first opera premiered with Chicago Opera Theater earlier this year. Woohoo!
That was just like a few weeks ago, right?
Yeah.
So exciting. Congratulations.
Thank
It must have been an incredible thrill.
Well, we did it live stream, so we, all the singers were in the Studebaker. We had been rehearsing in the Fine Arts Building. Everybody had masks on. They could only take off their masks right in the dress rehearsal and then the concert. And they also could only rehearse with 5 singers at the same time, and we had 6. So there, between that and the pit, the situation where the strings were wearing masks the whole time, we do have a flute and a clarinet in the mix, so they were placed really far back with a plexiglass in front of them, etc. So it was bizarre, but it was wonderful.
Well, congratulations and kudos to you and COT for making the music keep going in these times. It is, as we all know, it's no mean feat to make it happen. Yeah. Amanda, this is your first time with CAIC, although we met earlier this year in Philadelphia. But please, tell us a bit about your story. Where are you from and how did you get into singing?
Right. Hi, everyone. My name is Lynn Bottoms, and I am originally from Buffalo, New York. I spent for the first time in about 10 years, I spent the longest time I have in Buffalo with my family due to quarantine. So it was interesting to get to know the city. But currently I am in DC as a part of the CAIC Young Artists at Washington National Opera. A little bit of a standard but slightly unconventional path to where I am. I started out wanting to do musical theater. Like I was really gung-ho about it. I obsessed over Audra McDonald, but I also wanted to be like Whitney Houston. So I was in this weird middle ground. And I went to undergrad initially wanting to do musical theater. And my teacher, Lori Chimuta, she was fantastic and so sweet. And she said, honey, I think we need to explore classical music, not because that's the only thing you can do, but you can't dance and you're 5'9" and we're a little late to the game for musical theater in that way. So let's equip you with tools to do a lot of golden age musicals, which I do a lot of, and to do opera. And I was like, what's opera? So then she gave me Carmen's aria, La Habanera, I loved it. It fit so perfectly. And so that's how I started down the classical music route. But I've done a lot of musical theater along the way. And thanks to you and programs like Collaborative Arts and Philly Chamber Music, I'm doing a lot more chamber music these days. I have many things coming up that are in that thread, and I never really saw myself focusing on that, but it's proven to be very, very rewarding.
Well, I would think that a background in musical theater really actually helps you. I mean, you obviously need the musicianship skills, but there's the thing for singers in a chamber music setting is you have to be able to tell a story
Hmm.
without the aid of, the hair, the makeup, the sets, the other people on stage most of the time. And so, I mean, that's what I have been so struck by your performances, getting to know you this year, has been that you're such an incredible, expressive storyteller. And that's what you need in order to deliver a song when it's just you and a piano or you and a few instruments. So,
I appreciate that.
well, we are super grateful that you're here, and we were super grateful that you're here last week as well for the French program. So you're currently in DC, correct, at the Kennedy Center? Are you guys up to anything there? Are you working hard on studying at least, or?
Yeah, we are. We aren't actually able to go into the Kennedy Center physically because that is a separate entity and they have different protocol going on for COVID, but they've set up a really great system for us to safely continue work at the studio in Tacoma Park. And so today I had an acting coaching, but I had the pianist in the room with me, but the coach was we were working virtually. And it's very interesting because now I not only think about what translates on stage and what translates in audition, but what translates on video differently for both of those things. Is it a presentation and a performance? Is it an audition for film? How much is too much moving? And uh and the coach, she was like, claim your space. This is nothing like we've ever done. We were not prepared for this. So claim your space and do what you want to in it, because this is new terrain. And if we try and do the same old, we lose a great opportunity to make a new art form. So it's very interesting. And what you were saying about not having the resources, not having another colleague to speak to on the stage, to not have that conversation, we have to tap into that side of us, that creative. I'm going to imagine them, and I'm really going to speak to them and manifest them. It's very fun. It's really, really fun.
Yeah, it's adversity spurs creativity in a way, right? So let's talk a little bit about this piece that we're featuring on tomorrow's program. This weekend's program features, the bulk of it is this amazing song cycle that Stacy wrote in 2006. Is that right?
Yes.
Called In Eleanor's Words, and it featured. I mean, please, Stacy, you should tell us about it. I don't know why I'm talking about it. You're here.
Sure. Well, actually, this was the piece that got me introduced to Sadie Records, to Jim Ginsberg and Sadie, because Freda Hyman, I don't know, Nick, if you ever met her. She ran the Music in the Loft concert series that was out in the West Loop. And I was their composer in residence back in, I think it was 2004, 2005. And Jim Ginsberg reached out to Freda to say, I need a composer for a potential project. And so she put me in touch with him. And what it is that there was a man named Thomas Hamilton, who actually, he and his wife, his now deceased wife, they are in DC, Washington, DC. They went to Roosevelt, I believe, or one of them did, the husband. They wanted to commission a piece for their mother, who had been in like a civil servant for all of her career. So that's how this commission actually began, is they wanted a local composer from Chicago because the mother lives around here. They wanted to premiere the piece at a birthday party. I think it was for her 90th birthday, according to the top of the score.
Oh,
and we met together after Jim heard my music, and he passed it on to the commissioners, and they liked my music. And we all agreed on Eleanor Roosevelt because that was somebody that his mother really believed in. So, and because I was teaching at Roosevelt at the time, and he had gone to Roosevelt University, it's like, it was all coalescing around Roosevelt and around Eleanor. So that's how it began. The actual search for text was interesting because it was not so, if I had just from the beginning looked at the My Day newspaper column and said, okay, that's good enough, but I didn't. I started there and I had to go through all these other sources, looking through speeches and everything to finally realize, oh yeah, the My Day column was the right source for this. So the My Day
It's kind
column.
of it's kind of like when you're like looking for a movie on Netflix and you have to explore every single option to make sure that your initial instinct was the right one. Now
Exactly.
I totally get that.
So by the end of it, I came back to the My Day newspaper column. And this, if people aren't familiar, she ran a newspaper column from 1935 to 1962. And she would write about what's life like in the White House? What is she up to with her own business? And who are the people that are writing letters to her? And that is addressed in one of the things that you're going to hear tonight or tomorrow night. So it was, the hardest part was just keeping in mind, this is a birthday party. I've got to have some lighter moments. And so much of her stuff is just so incredibly specific and dry and detail oriented. So that's why the humor and lighter moments that I found in this piece were really striking.
It's actually, I mean, Amanda, you should offer your perspective because you're the one who performed it, but listening to it and studying it in order to program it for this, I was struck by how balanced it is. You get these like really meaty progressive politics speeches, and then you get these anecdotes that are, kind of tongue-in-cheek and sort of ironic and funny and make you chuckle a little bit. And I think it's interesting that the need of the birthday party is what facilitated that, but it ends up like leaving you with this really balanced piece.
And it was a bit hard. I actually got it down to about 20 columns, and then I got it down to 10. And then I think the commission was actually for 15 to 20 minutes. And by the time I got to like minute 18, I had to contact the commissioners and say, this thing's going to run over. Are you okay with that? Because it didn't feel right. I hadn't written the final movement yet. And I felt like it really needed to wrap up with what her hope was for the world. So they were fine, of course, with it. And they got more music for more bang for your buck.
So again, because of COVID, like this is really the first time you guys are meeting. Like normally under normal circumstances, Stacy would have come to a rehearsal or something, but we were trying to keep things minimal. And Stacy, you were very gracious to trust us with your baby. So Amanda, like, did you love learning the piece, or did you?
Well, yeah, as you said, there was something about it that was very balanced. In a way, something's unexpected, the way a few of the texts were set. But what I loved about the learning process was realizing the conversation that was happening between the instrumentation and the voice, and how the instrumentation was a character in itself, especially in, I would say, the Dove of Peace was probably my favorite. Actually, it was really, all of it was a challenge and extremely rewarding. But it was, especially in the times we're in, I found myself sometimes on like the verge of tears, reflecting on the words that are said and how so much time has passed between what she said and where we are now. And so many things are still relevant, especially today. And in the next, what is it now, 10, 11 days that are to come. There's so many things. But yeah, especially the last piece, when we think about as an individual, how do we contribute to the greater world? How does our vote count? Does what we do for our neighbors, does it make a difference? Alone, the words mean so much, but then to put in this music with it, it just like, I found times that I had to step away, but I had to be like, okay, you know what? I need a minute for myself because this is a lot. It's a lot, but it was wonderful. Thank you, Stacy, for this gift.
Well, I can't wait to hear you sing it.
Well, I'm here to tell you both that it sounds beautiful. I just finished working with the videographer and sound guys on editing it, and so it'll be fine. The final product is being delivered tomorrow morning. So
okay, wow.
But it sounds great. That last movement is so powerful. I mean, the last movement is called "What Can One Woman Do," and it's from an article about really the need for peace, right, and to try and stop war. And I mean, she's talking a lot in that about, I mean, the thing that makes the stakes high in that for her is nuclear proliferation. And It's funny, even though, I mean, of course, that is one of the many things that's on the table right now, but the stakes feel just as high with, you know, the, the sort of deluge of political information that comes our way. I'm trying to find like apolitical ways to say this. Um, and by the way, everybody who's watching, we will be sure to let you go to the presidential debate when it is time. So don't worry, we're not going to hold you back from that extravaganza. Um, but anyway, I mean, I've in the session, I mean, and I felt really lucky to be able to be in the session to listen because, I mean, I got to hear live music, which means I'm the luckiest person involved in this whole project. But, you know, especially the way you were delivering the spoken word at the end too, Amanda, I was just, I mean, my eyes were watering like crazy. And I was like, I have to focus right now. And also I can't make sound because we're recording. So.
Yeah, that end was always tricky for me to get through. I don't think I really ever got past it. Like when that whole music, I know not to get too technical, but it's basically a passacaglia. It's one idea that repeats over and over and over again. And the idea is she's mulling over how to figure this out before she passes away. This last text was only a couple of years before, I think before she passed away. It was a couple of years before she stopped writing the column. And it just, she laid it out so carefully. Here's what needs to be done. You start with the local level, you go to the national, you keep tabs on people that are going from the local to the national. And it was so clear in her head what we needed to do. And I don't know if we'll ever quite achieve everything that she laid out, but I think there are people, for instance, there's a man named Daniel Biss, who's actually, I think, the brother of the pianist. Mm-hmm. And he's active here in the Evanston, Chicago area as a politician. He started off as I believe as a law professor at University of Chicago. And he pivoted into politics and now he's trying to work his way up. And it's just like, okay, this is what Eleanor meant.
Yeah.
So it's nice to see that in action.
Yeah, and what for me it was really interesting how she talks about structures of power and how those things help regulate the way our world works. But she keeps coming back to the idea of power of the people, which is a weird thing in this moment of like, we need a savior kind of concept where everyone's saying like, vote for this person and they will fix everything. And she keeps like the delicacy with which she treats the anonymous letter and how much it matters to her that people are involved in the process. It's not just those who are in power, it's the people who choose those who will be in power. It's empowering today, even today, if not especially today.
It was interesting.
Remarkable.
Sorry.
Sorry.
No, she is remarkable. Amen. I mean, please expound if you wish.
Well, I don't know how serious it was at the time, but there were calls for her to run for president. And that's where I'd be curious to know, were those, I don't have context on those calls, but is it something that, would she have been the modern day Hillary or, Kamala Harris or who? But it's just the way that she thought, and I know that FDR really leaned on her support, on her ideas to help as he went about governing the nation.
She kind of would have been Hillary and Bernie combined.
Yeah.
I mean, if I can say it. She was an extraordinary woman. It was interesting to me in putting this program together how everybody had a lot of progressive politics on this program. They were also featuring a piece by Ruth Crawford Seeger, who, I mean, she was so progressive and populist that she ended up leaving this like avant-garde sort of ultra-modern style of composition and devoting herself to arranging folk music because she was trying to make the music of the people accessible to the people. And it lined up with her politics and her husband's politics. And that's why we have, this great folk tradition in people like her stepchildren and children, Pete Seeger and Peggy Seeger. I mean, it's just interesting to, and then like looking at the Eleanor Roosevelt text, and there was just so much, there was a through line there for me, which I just found. And then you combine that with the Langston Hughes poetry that was set by Margaret Bonds and Florence Price on this program. And it all kind of, it paints a really specific picture of a certain segment of the population's viewpoint on how things needed to be and how things need to change. And in the context of this moment of 2020, it's stark. It's it's very vivid. And actually, going back to your description, I mean, I appreciate you getting technical about the Passacaglia, because that was one of the things that I really, there's part of the reason why I wanted to harken back when we were planning a whole festival to start with Baroque composers. And actually that first Baroque program ended also with the song that was basically a Passacaglia. It was a ground bass, and that's a repeated thing that happens over and over again. And the text is, "What can one do?" It's a much more negative, like, I can't do anything kind of a take on things back then. But it's just, it was so interesting to me that you have someone like Barbara Strozzi setting those words with that kind of device. And then you have Stacy doing basically the same thing with a much more optimistic tune, you know, 400 years later. It's, so
Well,
thank you for mentioning that. That's
but I think actually what Amanda keyed into, I think, is absolutely correct. It was very helpful to think of sounds that depicted each movement. So for instance, the Supreme Power movement, this was where Eleanor is trying to get certain wording into the United Nations Declaration of Human Rights document, but it was really like a careful dance, the way they had to move around each other. And so I thought, waltz. And maybe that's a little too obvious, but there you go. And with the Dove of Peace, the whole idea is that they're trying, there was so much tension in that time period about the Cold War and what's going on. I wanted the sound of artillery. So all those repeated notes to me is like these machine guns that are going off. So once I get that image locked in my head, then I just need to orchestrate that and lay that into the form that I'm going for in the text.
It's super clear and super effective. I mean,
yeah. So I hope people enjoyed the set.
Oh, they definitely will.
They're definitely going to.
Yeah.
So, you know, since we're, I mean, this whole, I've been thinking a lot about the state of the woman composer as I've been kind of like drafting all the program notes for this too, and also in the process of putting this together. And, you know, Stacy, how do you feel about the state of the woman composer today? And
well, I think we're better off than when I was in school. I think I was at Michigan from 88 to 92 for my undergrad. And then I went to University of Chicago and then Indiana, and I graduated in 2000. And it was very typical to maybe only be the only female in my class, or maybe two of us that would come in at the same time, and then maybe a few more after us. So we were always in the minority. And I think for the most part, that has still, like back when I was teaching at Roosevelt, there still weren't that many women that would enter at the same time. Although things have changed enough that I had one student who had only studied with female teachers as a composer. And I thought, wow, that's unusual. But I think there are moments where big organizations are trying to realize, okay, we really have to do something. So before the pandemic, there was a big push for orchestras to start to program more music by women. And Opera America has 2 different grants to help encourage women to be writing opera. So I think there is attention being given. It's just, and as we come out of this whole time period, also with the Black Lives Matter movement and the way that they're now trying to bring so much wonderful attention to the fact that we need more voices in the concert hall, on the stage, and in opera and chamber music and everything, that I'll be very curious to see what the mix is when we come out of this. Hopefully the music that we will see on all stages in every form and in concert halls will really represent the population, and not just that small sliver of here's that European music that we've been teaching in schools and everything else. I hope that we are far more reflective of what we actually look like and who we are.
do you find that this moment has, I mean, as a minority, like as a non-white singer and a non-straight singer, this moment I've certainly found it empowering in a way. I wonder if you feel similarly about these past couple of years of progress for
it's hard. Like I've seen this before, you know, like, uh, will this stick? That's the question I have. Like there's great moments when things move in the right direction, and then once that funding program ends or that concert series is over, then they sometimes go back to the way it was before. So I'm really hoping that one of these times it really takes, and we are really reflective, and it stays that way. And I think that change has to come really from the top levels. So looking at the board of directors and the administrators, and what can they do to not just say, okay, let's make it one concert season or one special event, but what can we do to just make this who we are, part of what we're doing.
How about you, Amanda?
Well, I was going to say, I think that something that's a little different about this instance is the access to technology and owning one's space. So I think the lack of, or not the lack of, but sometimes the lack of awareness of what art is available, I think affects what is programmed. People just assume that classical music is Mozart because that's all they are force fed is, you know, it's only Puccini, it's only Mozart, it's only Brahms, it's only these um, iron giants that we have in our canon. But now I think the power of the like is very strong. If boards of directors see that someone is getting a lot of attention online and they're putting their work out there because they don't have to wait for funding from it for it, and they don't have to wait for a cast to be together, they can assemble people from all over the world, which is really interesting now. Is you can send someone a backtrack and they can record it in a couple of days. You have a concert that you'd never been able to afford in person. So I do think it will stick in some way. If it doesn't stick in the theaters, it is going to stick in our everyday lives because the people will demand that it continues on in their, these are concert halls in their own way, so they will demand that it's happening there. But yes, I agree. I hope that the people from the top are listening, are engaging, are educating themselves on the broader canon that exists and continues to expand. But yeah, I haven't lived through anything like this before, so I am hopeful. um, yeah, I have immense hope in what's to come.
I agree that there's a lot of reason to hope, and I think part of it is the thing that you're talking about, which is the way. I mean, these technologies. It's easy to bemoan the ways in which they've really disrupted our industry in ways that make our lives on a practical level harder in some ways. But what you're talking about right now is it also empowers us to make our own art and get our own art out there without needing to rely on gatekeepers. And if you can do that and really reach people and develop an audience, that forces gatekeepers to pay attention. And that's, I think, something that's unique about this, or at least just it's a unique quality to this moment that maybe, I don't know if it's unprecedented or not, but what it is it does make it different from, and it does give me hope too. At the same time, Stacy, I share the skepticism because like, I don't want to count chickens before they hatch.
Yeah.
It's one of I mean, over the course, one of the great things I feel like I've learned from just being involved with this organization, CAIC, and doing the programming work that I've been fortunate enough to do here, is that I have felt highly educated and I've gotten a big education. I've learned a lot but the main thing that I feel like I've learned is that the idea of a canon is mythology. It's a fallacy. It's an invented thing that was invented in like the 19th century by people like Pauline Viardot. Like she subscribed to that idea and she pushed it. And people like Nadia Boulanger would like, she subscribed to it too. And, you know, facilitated its growth and its entrenchment, like both ways over the last century. But it's an invented thing. You know, there is so much great music out there being written now, and that was written beforehand that people just don't pay attention to because they have some sort of implicit bias against it for some reason, you know, or they just kind of wash it off to anecdote. And at least for me, and I hope this is true for the audience, and I really hope this is true for, you know, Amanda, like people like you who come through and are gracious enough to learn all this random stuff that I throw at you, is that it's fun to have this adventure of learning other great masterworks that exist and that are not canon, because the canon is just something we all mutually agreed upon and that developed out of certain group of people having privilege and, you know, in that, the oppression of others. And so I hope that, at least my goal with what we're doing here, and what I'm grateful for to both of you for helping us do, is to kind of disabuse of ourselves of that notion.
Yeah, it's extremely rewarding because when we learn these items that are standard that we can expect to be on programs, at least I always think about what has the composer from his personal life infused into the music. What about this relationship between these two characters is a reflection of their life that they're putting a little bit into, and then to do that with music that I hadn't heard before, it forces me to take on other perspectives. It forces me to be a person aware of the world around me. And if that's not the purpose of art, I don't know what is. If it's not to connect people and to tell stories, not just the stories that we, how do I word this? Not just the stories that we are told are important. Every story is important. We need to take on that philosophy that just because it's unfamiliar doesn't mean it's invalid. So these works, some of them that are not new in terms of timeline, but they are new to us because they've been, in a way, kept from us. When I think about looking for newer works, I'm trying to program a recital right now, and I want to find things, and it's so hard to access them, either because of the price point, or unfortunately due to COVID, they're in some library in the middle of Tennessee, and it's kind of hard to get a photocopy of it. That presents struggles, but we have to have that drive to find it, to unearth these pieces and treasure them, because they're a part of our history. They're a part of our mutual history as people, especially as Americans. We are so proud of being this melting pot, but then we look at a lot of media and a lot of art, and it's very singular. So I find great excitement in doing these things, and then it encourages me to talk to my peers about it and encourage them and say, you know, maybe you could add at least one piece by a woman, at least one piece by someone not white and male. So
Right.
I find it very thrilling.
Yeah,
So,
we've seen,
go ahead. I was going to ask you a question, but you go.
well, we've seen different approaches. I know that I think it was Rob Deemer who was
Oh,
basically calling out orchestras, saying this is the percentage of women that you're programming in a year, and of Black Americans or Asian or whatever that he was going through. And after a couple of years, that finally, I think that was one of the things, enough people calling them out to say, look, you can do better than this. And that has worked. So I think that's a start. I think that, Amanda, you're absolutely right. There's so much that is we still have to unearth. There's been creators as long as forever. But when I was in grad school, I was shocked to come across a whole bunch of scores at the University of Chicago Library of composers I'd never heard that were excellent, that had written excellent pieces. But it just wasn't in the canon for us to study or for us to discover in any way. And so we have that to find. And then we have so many creators right now who have wonderful stories to tell and would love to be able to share their stories. So we need to find ways to bring their stories to the stage and to the concert hall too.
yeah, I yelped because I went to school. I went to SUNY Fredonia where Rob
Ah,
is a professor. And I always remember how impactful it was to go to the New Works concerts that they hosted and to hear diverse stories and to be approached to do some works. The first commissioned piece that I ever did was for mezzo and mixed percussion, but it just, yeah, it was so exciting. So every time I hear about the work he's doing, and particularly the women that he wants to engage and lift up, I just feel I'm thrilled by it. I'm so excited by it. It's exciting to know someone who's doing it.
yeah. And there's others besides him too, but that's my point, is enough people start to make noise that finally you people of higher begin to pay attention. So I think it's been very helpful. And then I think it was the Philadelphia Orchestra that brought out a bunch of women composers. I think it was like 5 or so, and they said that one would probably get a commission. It turns out all of them got little commissions. And it was like, that is awesome. That's what, that's so supportive. So I think there's so many ways that you don't have to have huge commissions to do this. You don't have to write an hour-long piece, but give 5 women a chance to write something short that then gets out into the audience. One of the orchestras I've been most impressed by is the Albany Symphony, because David Allen Miller made it clear cut many decades ago. He's not that old. But he said, we're going to feature new music. And now the audience expects it. And if they don't get enough, then they're upset. So why should that one orchestra cultivate only, basically new music and all these others not? So I think there's great work being done all over. We just need to keep amplifying what we think are great examples, and then see if we can get more people on board.
Yeah, so you talking about calling out, I mean, I feel like there's just in general over the last decade or so, there's been a lot of calling out of from music critics in a good way about how our classical music institutions have kind of over the last few decades or generations, whichever way you choose to look at it, have kind of, calcified. And it's sort of like a museum that doesn't really, it freezes history and it freezes our view of history as opposed to viewing it as a living and breathing and evolving thing. Like history is something, even though that it's past already, our relationship with it continues to change and evolve. And, we learn new nuances and we find out the undiscovered stories that, that weren't told or weren't prioritized at the time that finally get light shed on them, and it changes us. And so if you're not including new music on a regular basis in your programming, you don't have a foot in today, and you stop treating the art form as a living and breathing thing, which it is.
Yeah, it does make me wonder, like, so many orchestras will play a lot of Beethoven or Mahler, and believe me, I love Beethoven and Mahler, but what were they playing in Beethoven and Mahler's time period, Like, were they looking a little earlier? Were those contemporaries that were being, I just don't know. But my point is, I think there's room for it all. And I think we just need to cultivate that expectation. Here in Chicago Sinfonietta does a fabulous job of mixing it up. So you might not get a whole symphony, you might get a movement of a symphony, but then you get something like a percussion concerto. And there was one woman that sang and played, I think it was bagpipes and piano, or it was a concerto. It's like, who knew? And so they have taken, Man Chen and the Sinfonietta have taken a lot of wonderful risks. And I just love going to their concerts and seeing you don't know what's going to happen. And that's the beauty of it.
It's funny, that's actually kind of a conservative approach to symphonic programming, because about 100, 200 years ago, that's how they were doing it. You would play a portion of a symphony, you wouldn't necessarily play the whole thing. You'd feature, it would sometimes feel a little bit like Choose Your Own Adventure, and it was adventurous.
Yeah.
And you got a tasting menu of stuff. And actually, this is, especially doing the research for these particular concerts, particularly last week's concert, when I was reading a lot about, turn of the century, and reading a lot about Pauline Viardot, who is not someone I was super familiar with as a composer. It was really interesting to me. In one of the biographies of her that I was reading, they were including these statistics about the percentages. And like at the beginning of the 1800s, 80% of the music being played was living people. And by the end, 80% of the music being played was by non-living people. So, yeah. I mean, that's when that shift started to happen, like around 1900, and it's in late, second half of the 19th century. And
yeah,
that's actually really recent history. I find that really liberating. That makes me feel like I'm not shedding off like generation. I mean, like eons of tradition. It's like you're acknowledging that things just shift and move and evolve, and tastes should change, and we can influence those things.
Yeah, and I love these sensationalized movies about classical music where like the women are fainting in the crowd, or they're treated like rock stars. But I think it's because they were doing living composers, and because they felt a connection, because the time that the music was reflecting on was relevant to them. They were living in that time. So when we think, talking about Beethoven, revolutionary music, and it harkens back to a time of perhaps battle or something. but we are always having to have a backwards gaze. Whereas if somebody wrote something about like the conflicts that are happening right now, how deeply would it touch us? How deeply, I can only imagine the music that's going to come out as a result of this quarantine, and the political climate we're in. Like, it's going to be powerful stuff, and people are going to feel differently about classical music because they're going to have lived through that time, and it doesn't feel like this old people in white powdered wigs wearing bad makeup and pointy shoes. It's not going to feel like that because that's not what it is. That's what was fashionable in the time. That's what it was written for. So why we don't celebrate pieces that are written for today and written to reflect our lives is interesting, but it's yeah, maybe it's because there's truth in it. Maybe because we don't want to face the truths that we're living through. Maybe we're afraid of what the music could reveal about ourselves, about our society, because art is a mirror. It is a mirror. So I think we need to engage in it more.
Yeah, so it's not a funhouse mirror, but an actual one.
Yeah.
And it is
So,
fascinating to see the, oh, sorry.
go.
It's fascinating to see the types of works that people are putting out right now. We had one of the very first early ones I remember in April, I think it was April, was Kamala Sankaram, or maybe it was May. She's an opera composer, and she wrote a Zoom opera, basically, a 15-minute Zoom opera about, I'm so sorry, I don't remember the title, but she had figured out all the issues to do with Zoom and then figured out how they could get around it and actually put on a live opera on Zoom. And it's like, that's fabulous. That only took, what, 6 weeks? And so those sorts of advances have been happening. So Amanda, what you referenced before about how I think the technology part will stick with us, I think you're absolutely right. And maybe that's for the better. Maybe this will bring us more ways to collaborate with people that we never would have before.
Yeah, and not even from a programming standpoint, from an accountability standpoint, we can tell. I don't know if, let's say, when I was an undergrad, that would have been the early 2000s. I wouldn't have thought to use social media as a means of engaging with boards or with artistic directors, general directors. Now, if I have, and I'm going to Yelp it, I'm going to post on their Facebook, I'm going to write on their Instagram what I think is interesting, what I think they should be programming. So if people use that to their advantage and say what they want to hear, there's no way to get around the receipts of that. There's no way to say, oh, well, nobody wants to see that. There's literally people saying they want to see new voices and hear new voices.
So speaking of things that are happening now, Stacy, are you working on anything now? And are you willing to share?
I'm actually right now between projects, which is kind of funny. When the pandemic hit, I was in a slew of orchestra pieces. So I did a couple in a row. One of them actually did premiere already. It's called The Battle for the Ballot, and it's about the suffragists and the 19th Amendment. And so,
in Cabrillo.
Yes, the Korea Festival. I didn't think that was going to happen. This is a reason to write when you're, even when you think that the piece might not happen anytime soon, because if I hadn't done it, they wouldn't have virtually recorded this thing. And they did it. All 60 musicians did 2 full takes of the 16.5-minute piece in their homes. And Svet Stoyanov is a percussionist and a producer, an engineer. He put this whole thing together. So that was remarkable. Then the opera happened, and then that had already been written. But I just finished a piece with for horn and clarinet and piano called Slipstream, which will premiere with the Dallas Symphony Orchestra Chamber Series, actually a women's symposium in a couple weeks. And it's about cycling. So I'm actually writing right now, My Dearest Ruth is a piece about Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Since her passing, a lot of people are expressing interest in programming it. So what I've been doing in the last couple of days is making some chamber editions available and making it for more vocal types. And then I have a couple of other orchestra pieces to do. And I'm supposed to be writing a piece for The Crossing. We just put that off by a year. So that's I think the biggest part of this whole pandemic is what are the things that are now getting moved that we can just add an addendum to the contract, and then the little pieces are moving up. So I'm doing a lot of chamber stuff right now. So in other words, it's like as a composer, I think there's always like several things going on at once. You know, I'm fixing this and getting that ready for presser. I'm doing this over here, getting that contract ready. And everything slowed down initially as the pandemic started and nobody knew what was happening. But slowly but surely, things have started rolling again.
That's amazing. I'm not surprised, and that's great because that means that everybody has music during and after this
Well,
is all over.
I think that's part of it too. Like I wrote a piece for Music of the Baroque here in Chicago, and initially we thought it would be about the Chicago Fire or commemorating that. But now it's more about let's just celebrate that we're going to get back together, and this piece will hopefully be on their first concert when they can actually be live again. So I wanted to make a celebratory piece for them for that. So I think this has really given me a different focus throughout this time. I do have one piece that's truly a pandemic piece that's called Silver Linings, because we're always finding silver linings during this time, and it's for saxophone and marimba. But the biggest thing that I think I've been trying to do during this time period is try to bring some solace to people because it's so chaotic. And I have this little piece, it's about 5 minutes long, called The Solitude of Stars. And it's from a sextet that I wrote when I was in Wyoming for an artist colony. And I basically I've made 17 different arrangements of it during this time. So I'm giving them as gifts to different players. And that way they can just have this little, and it's not too hard to put together. I got a recording last night of the soprano saxophonist and pianist. So they're going to premiere it in a couple of weeks. And just to be able to send these little wafers of calm and solace out into the world feels really good right now.
That's amazing.
So that's about it.
Music with a mission. I love it. By the way, as we're drawing to a close, if anybody has any comments or questions out there in the Peanut Gallery, please type them in the comments. I am watching.
I have a question. Is that
yes?
Okay, so Stacy, as a mezzo, we're always lamenting over there's not enough repertoire for us, or the sopranos always get the moment. Was it a specific choice to choose a mezzo for this? I thought it was because of the groundedness of Eleanor's words of who she was. Us mezzos are pretty grounded. But did you choose that voicing for a particular reason?
Actually, it's because of the singer who premiered it. Her name is Buffy Baggett, and she was a Chicagoan. She now's in the Bay Area, and I just love her voice. And I wanted to ask, I can't remember if this is actually how we became friends. I think it might be, but I wanted to write for her. So I started with the singer, and then the rest of it came forward.
That's amazing.
But
And
yeah,
and do you tend to have musical ideas that are drawn from the text, or do you read through the text and then you're like, okay, this is what inspires it, or is it kind of a mix of those?
well, it really is about the story. So that very first one is about this newspaper column, and I just pictured how the president and his entourage and Eleanor are at this picnic. She's trying to get her column written, and everything is so crazy around her. So I wanted to write this busy music. What does it sound like when everything is just so busy and frantic around her? And so once I get that lock on what that looks like, then I can figure out what it sounds like.
Okay,
So I'm a very visual composer that way.
that's awesome.
Yeah.
You're so great at painting a scene, musically speaking.
But I always wish I had a voice, I don't know how you do what you do. I'm just how
No, but
either of you do what you
know.
do.
I wish I could compose because I have lots of thoughts, but I don't know how to one hear an instrument in my head. Yeah, it's very different skill sets, but I admire what you do because yeah, you can create a world and you can layer it in so many ways. It's really fascinating.
Actually, I just finished a project with Keenan Kyles, who he's a young artist at Chicago Opera Theater, and this is a piece that will premiere next week. But I wanted to write a piece called Meditation for the Inner Storm that's a vocal piece. There's no words. And I wanted it to be about, once again, finding calmness in this time period. So this is what you can do. He and I went back and forth at least 3 or 4 different times where he would record it. We get on Zoom and we talk about, okay, let's try it this way. Let's try it that way. And he was wonderful. I think we went literally through 3 very, very different versions of this piece before we came up with the one. So maybe you've got this collaborator spirit in you
Yeah.
to team up and create some great things together with somebody.
Hopefully, I'll explore it. I have to, if I know that I have it in me, I have to find a way to get it out.
Yeah, but it really, the more I've worked with opera singers, the more I realize they're fellow collaborators. You guys, what you have to do up there, the way you memorize, the way you embody, that's unlike really any other world I've ever come across. And it's very humbling. It's like I'm expecting so much of you. I really want to make your lives as easy as I can as a result. And to have Keenan say, nope, that's, that's not going to work. Oh, but here, let's try it this way. This is awesome. So
And
I think,
that's one of the joys of working with a living composer is like it's so cool when you think about when Rossini and Mozart wrote, they were writing for the people that they had in mind. It wasn't this like necessarily stock thing that doesn't always work for the voice, but it's very exciting
mhm.
to have that privilege to work with someone and to be able to say that won't work to be able to express that and be vulnerable and find what will work to tell the story best. I
Yeah.
love that part.
And even up to the last, I think it was about a week ago, or a couple of days before he recorded it, he sent me an audio file of the last note. He had taken it another octave higher than it was written, and it was already in a falsetto range. I didn't know he had a D 2 octaves above, the middle CD. Like, he's a baritone. So it's a head voice, but it was so funny. It's like, that's brilliant. Let's put it in. But that's where I think that the strength is in collaboration. You can't assume that you are the only party that understands everything in the world. And if you did, that's, I don't know. Where's the fun in that? I want to be able to put our heads together and come up with something that would be just something neither one of us could have done. And it is just awesome and makes the world happy. I'm all about making the world happy these days, apparently.
It sounds like people pleasing of the highest order, though. Like,
Well, I think that's just, I've wondered a lot during the selection time. I've thought really a lot about how does a composer make a difference during this time? I'm not trying to be overly political with my pieces, although there are moments I'm more so. Like Eleanor's words, the parts near the end are a little more saying, this is what I think we should be doing. And then Terra Nostra is about the planet, about what we're doing to the planet. So I do have those moments. But in this particular action cycle, I think the biggest problem I have is feeling this high anxiety that we don't know what's coming next. We don't know what crazy thing might happen politically or with the environment or with the pandemic. So if I can create something that calms me down, maybe it's going to help others too. And when I began sending out those versions of the Solitude of Stars, and people began writing back saying, "Oh my goodness, this is something that really feels wonderful right now." It's like, okay, maybe this is my direction I need to be. And maybe not being political sometimes doesn't mean putting it in your face, but maybe giving people a moment of repose from everything going on.
yeah, I mean, that's kind of what I always think our art is ultimately about, bringing people together and finding some sort of comfort. I mean, I think that's why people turn to music in a time of crisis. And that's what makes this moment particularly hard, because it's very difficult for us to gather to be able to give that to our communities.
Mm-hmm.
So it's amazing that you're looking for ways. I mean, it makes complete sense that you would be looking for ways to enable people to do that. We're getting some funny commentary. One person says lovely words from all of you, but another, our board president, actually says very appropriate to hear this right before the upcoming debate.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
But yeah, I think singers are going through a similar, at least this singer right here is, what is my purpose after this is all over? What am I going to retain when I leave this? Because a lot of times when I was going into my work, it was how can I be of service to the company I'm in to ensure that I get employed the next time, rather than how am I of service to the audience? How am I of service to that one person in the audience who needs to hear what I am saying, what I'm offering in this moment? And yeah, as not the composer, as not the person who can necessarily write the words and give that context, how we're interpreting things is really a part of my work at the moment, and looking at things with a fresh perspective. What am I not willing to do that challenges what I believe in? Because there are a number of works that we love, but we maybe need to put aside for a little while. So it's beautiful to hear that we're all trying to find ways to connect as we isolate in our homes and wait for a vaccine and this election and everything. Yeah, it's a hard time, but
but
music, art is gonna save us.
I think that is one of the strengths of the technology, is to be able to jump on Zoom and say, hey, let's workshop this together, and it's not going to be perfect, but that's not the point. We're still able to connect because of this. So I think that for me, at least, has been the saving grace with all these little projects. It's a way to keep connected to this musician and that musician and this person, and make me feel like it's not all lost. You know, we're still moving forward. We're not just stalled.
Yeah, and it's not all going to be perfect. That's the perfect way to say it, is that's not what art is about. It's not about this perfect thing. It's about, what is your soul feeling? What is my soul feeling? And this weird thing that we discovered years ago, how to do it, how can we connect through that? Um, yeah, oh God, it doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to be honest. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a funny thing about the technology too, because normally when we approach this technology, we use this technology in the ways in which we're using it now, like filming and recording. We are always normally, under normal circumstances, at least previously, aiming to have that perfect that recording or that perfect document of what it is that we're doing. And this moment is really forcing all of us, I think, to just look at this as, this is a snapshot, and this might be a snapshot that I don't feel great about when I look back on it on Facebook in 20 years, but it's a picture in time, and I'm expressing you know, feelings and responding to the moment and making it happen.
And it gets us through and gives us hope. I think for me, I tend to be a little bit more of the glass half empty than the glass half full type of person. And
No.
so knowing that, like doing all these little pieces that are trying to give hope is a way to also remind me, oh yeah, this is the goal. I'm gonna stay positive through this whole time period as much as I can.
Well, it sounds like you're very successful at maintaining your spirits and keeping them up, both of you.
Trying. Yeah, and I can't wait to hear the concert tomorrow night. Thank you so much for both of you. Thank you, Nick, for programming it, and Amanda for taking it on. And I can't wait to hear your interpretation of Eleanor.
Well, thank you so much for entrusting us with the piece. So thank you both. If you just bear with me for 1 second, I'll just wrap up quickly, and then everybody can go watch whatever they want to watch. Tomorrow, please tune in. We will be Facebook Live, and also on our website. We'll be doing a premiere broadcast of Modern Women program tomorrow at 7 p.m. Central, and it will stream. If you can't make it tomorrow evening, it will stream for through the weekend on demand at both places. So you can just tune into both of those places. We're featuring, of course, Stacy's amazing piece, which is the bulk of the program, called In Eleanor's Words, which Amanda is going to perform with our amazing co-founder, Shannon McGinnis, who I have to say, I just have to say this because it's important. The idea for this festival was all Shannon's. She was the one who suggested we think about this as a theme, and I'm so grateful to her for that idea, because it has spawned, I think, one of the most interesting sets of programs we've had in our 10-year history. So we've got Stacy's piece tomorrow. We also have works by Margaret Bonds and Florence Price and Ruth Crawford Seeger, sort of trying to bridge the gap between now and the early 20th century, late 19th century. And we also have 2 Midwestern premieres, one by a composer named Erilyn Wallen, and who was featured on last year's festival, and one by a composer named Eva Bitova. And both are duets, so you'll hear baritone Chris Kenny join Amanda and Shannon for these amazing pieces, which are stunningly beautiful, and I hope you enjoy them. And there's also a song by Sarah Kirkland Snyder, who is another living composer who composes beautiful, amazing, really touching music of our time. So I think that's everything that's tomorrow, and we all hope that you will tune in. And thank you so much again, Amanda and Stacy.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night, Facebook. Enjoy whatever you're doing. Enjoy.
Good night.